Alrighty, welcome to the A2A Cessna 172 cruise tutorial. I've set us up on course for the Cecil VOR at 6,500 feet. Now we just finished climbing and we've just leveled off and we've at our airspeed, power set. First thing we need to do, turn landing light off. So landing light's off during cruise. I like it. A lot of checklists have it coming off during climb. I like to leave it on during climb and then turn it off once we get established in the cruise phase. Alright, so real quick we'll run the cruise portion of the checklist. Power 2,000 to 2,400 RPM, no more than 80%. Mixture, lean, we'll do that in a second. Altimeters, main, autopilot, and GPS, reset. Alrighty, so we're going to want to reset our altimeters. It was set when we took off, but we want to reset it. As you're cruising during your cross country, what you want to do is find airfields nearby with an ATIS or an AWOS, and just tune it and listen to it to get the altimeter setting. One thing I really wish Flight Sim modeled would be HIWAS, which is it's with VORs. When you tune a VOR frequency in real life and the VOR has HIWAS and the aircraft has the capability of receiving HIWAS transmissions, the VOR will have a weather report, what the surface conditions are like at the VOR station, which is very useful. That gives you a lot more information when you're flying, especially with your altimeter. Alright, so we're going to talk about the autopilot first. Now, the autopilot in this aircraft is a CAP 140 autopilot from Bendix King. It's a little finicky. It does not behave like the default autopilot. In fact, A2A modeled this autopilot very accurately. First of all, when you use it, it is very realistic in operation. Just remember that. You want to push the autopilot button first. That turns the autopilot on and commands it in vertical speed and roll mode. Next, you want to maintain your. Next, you want to hit your roll mode control, which will either be heading or navigation. We want navigation hold right now. That way it'll hold us on the VOR course I have set. Next, you want to hit altitude. That will hold the current altitude selected in the window. Do note this, however. We were already at cruise when we turned that on. What if we wanted to turn it on during climb and have it capture an altitude? I'm going to turn altitude hold back off. And set it for a vertical speed hold of 0. Then I'm going to set our altitude to 8,500. Now I'm going to hit altitude hold again. It doesn't do anything. It's just holding our current altitude. What I have to do is turn altitude hold off, hit the up button. See, when altitude hold is off, it puts it in vertical speed hold. Now I'm going to hit these up and down buttons to set the vertical speed I want. We'll say 500 feet per minute, which, by the way, is the minimum climb rate when you're operating IFR. Then, let's note this. I have it set in vertical speed hold. It's going to maintain 500 feet per minute climb rate. However, it will not capture 8,500. It will continue at the 500 feet climb rate and bust 8,500. In order for me to get the autopilot to capture 8,500 and hold it, I have to hit the arm switch. Now, altitude is armed. It'll say it's in VS mode, altitude arm. When it hits 8,500, it'll capture it. And real quick, we're going to tune, as it's climbing, we're going to look up Cecil's information. Victor, Quebec, Quebec. And I just want to look up its ATIS frequency. Its ATIS is on 125.28, so I'm going to set that in COM 2. It's recommended you keep your weather in COM 2 and navigation and communications in COM 1. That comes more into play when you're flying an aircraft with G1000 avionics, when you have two separate buses. In the aircraft that I flew with G1000, the COM 1 Nav 1 radio was on the main battery bus, versus the COM 2 Nav 2 radio was on the avionics bus. In this aircraft, all the radios are on the avionics bus, so it really doesn't matter which one you set your frequency on. The idea of having the weather in COM 2 in the aircraft I flew in real life was, since that COM 2 was on the avionics bus, if something happened and you lost your avionics bus, you would still have your COM radios. Alrighty. Okay, we're 1,000 feet to go. Now I'm going to listen to Cecil's ATIS real quick. I think. Do I have the right frequency? I got to be close enough to see it. Cecil's like not that far away. 125.28. Ah. That's the problem. I had the wrong frequency.
Cecil, airport information, Victor 1734, Zulu, wind 356 at 4, visibility greater than 20 miles, sky conditions, no clouds below 20,000, temperature 30, 2.21, altimeter 3000, ILS, runway 36 right and visual, runway 36 left in use, landing and departing, runway 36 right and runway 36 left.
Alright, now we're approaching 8,500. I've reset the altimeter to Cecil's Field, which you can actually see right here. That's Cecil Field right there. Boeing has a hangar there. That's where they do some airplanes. Right down here is White House Naval Outlying Field. Alright, weather's throwing the airplane for a loop. Now, during the climb video, I mentioned leaning the mixture out as you climb, roughly 1 mouse wheel turn every 1,000 feet of altitude. That gets your mixture at a good rate of leaning out, to whereas once you hit cruise, you won't have to lean it out much, if at all. I believe in real life, 1 mouse wheel turn in the real life airplane translates to 1 full turn on the mixture knob. Alright, see, the airplane captured 8,500 feet because I armed it. Now it's in nav hold and altitude hold mode. Now, a lot of people have been complaining that the autopilot doesn't hold altitude. It often fluctuates, and it also doesn't hold a course very well. This is accurate. The Cap 140 autopilot can be a bit finicky at times. It's not perfect. It does tend to fluctuate its altitude sometimes, and its navigation course. So, rest assured, A2A modeled the autopilot accurately. So again, you know, autopilot's there. It's not perfect. It's not a Boeing autopilot like you find on the NGX that holds a precision altitude within 50 feet. Now, this one does fluctuate a little bit. That's why you want to treat it as if it was a real aircraft. You never tell the autopilot to do something that you yourself as the pilot can't do. The autopilot is there as a tool to help you when you get overloaded, not as a crutch. Okay, as far as using the other commands on the autopilot, I recommend just reading the manual. I've given you the information you need to get yourself working on it. Again, descending with the autopilot, the same thing as climbing, just in reverse order. Barometric altitude, you can change your barometric altitude from here. I set it to 3000. You can change it separately. It is separate. I think it's separate. It is separate from the altimeter. So always make sure that is set. Let me reset it back to 3000 before it collides us into the ground. So that's one of the things you want to keep up with whenever you reset your altimeter, and you want to set it before you take off too. Hit the baro button, set the altimeter. It's separate from the altimeter over here, so keep that in mind. Alright, next thing we want to go over is more of a general aviation knowledge thing when it comes to cruise, and that has to do with VOR navigation. Another thing I want to mention before I do is 15 minutes. You have a stopwatch over here which I recommend using during cruise. Every 15 minutes you want to reset your heading indicator. It will drift and will be off by at least 15 degrees every hour. So at 15-minute intervals, you either want to match it up to the magnetic compass with the knob here, or do what I like to do and just push the D key on your keyboard unless you've rebind that to something else. By default, pushing the D key will reset the heading indicator to the magnetic compass. It's a vacuum-driven gauge, so it will drift. Alright, next thing I want to note is navigation with the VORs. I'm gonna set a GPS waypoint to the Cecil VOR. We're pretty much close to it right now. Now I'm gonna pause the sim. I want to note something. For one, Cecil does not have DME, so this is not the best VOR to use to tell you this. But I've gone over this in previous videos. VOR DME indicates slant range, which is the straight line distance from the transmitter on the ground to the receiver antenna on the aircraft. The antenna on the aircraft, if I remember correctly, the VOR antenna is on the tail, and it's that V-shaped antenna right there. That's your VOR. Down here, there's other antennas. This is the that little shark fin looking one there is the transponder. That's ADF right there, I believe. This one here, I think's DME. These two on the top are the comm radios. And the aircraft I flew, we had two GPS systems on the airplane, so that antenna shared both GPS 1 and COM 1. So that's your communication radios right there, these two antennas on the top. COM 1, GPS 1, COM 2, GPS 2. Now, there's only one GPS on this airplane. This handheld unit here has its own antenna, so it's separate from the aircraft. But the integrated GPS, GNS 400, or whatever you're using if you've changed it, will be through the COM radios here. And this little antenna on the back just above the tail number is ELT. So, this isn't the best VOR to show you because it doesn't have DME. But if next time you're in Flight Simulator, do yourself a little test. Find a VOR station with DME and fly over it at about 6,500 feet. And note what the DME says. Now, this works in default aircraft too. And it will say 1 nautical mile, even when you're directly over the station. That's because that's the straight line distance. You are 1 mile above the station now. So if you could think of it as a right triangle, your altitude is one leg of the right triangle, your distance from the station is another leg of the right triangle, and the hypotenuse of that triangle would be the DME. The closer you are to the station and the higher up you are, the bigger that error is going to be. So that's just something to have in mind. You need to know, especially it's more with cruising than it is with anything else. I believe with VOR approaches, they've set them up for DME, so you don't have to worry about that with approaches. So if you see if you're doing a VOR approach and it says 8 DME is when you need to start your descent, then you started at 8 DME. They've already figured in the error. All right, we're approaching the Cecil VOR. Now, VORs get very sensitive as you get closer. Within a mile and a half of the station, depending on your ground speed, is what I like to call the cone of confusion. Actually, that's what it's called in real life. I like depending on ground speed, mile and a half from the station. We have a ground speed of roughly 135 knots right now. We're almost over the station, so real quick, I'm going to find the St. Augustine VOR. And I'm going to tune it 109.4. Alright, we're passing over the station now. The autopilot, I believe in default autopilot will just kill off nav hold. As you can see, the autopilot's trying to turn right now because we're pretty much over the station. We got a red flag here, so we're over the station now. We should see the to from indicator switch from to to from. These weather updates are killing me. Okay, we're directly over the station now. Autopilot switched back to roll hold. This means it's going to try to hold its wings as level as possible. That's what roll hold means. I'm going to set the St. Augustine VOR real quick. And this VOR has DME. I'm going to set the course we want to fly to the St. Augustine VOR. St. Augustine is over there, so I want to set up an intercept. I'm going to put us in heading hold mode and establish a 45-degree intercept to a radial. Whenever you have full deflection of the antenna or the CDI on your OBS here, you want to have a 45-degree intercept angle. I'm going to fly us inbound to the St. Augustine VOR on the 110 radial. Now I'm going to put 110 at 45 degrees. Now these little orange tick marks on the heading indicator are the 45-degree marks. Each one is 45 degrees apart. The bigger ones are your cardinal ones. Right, that should give us a 45-degree intercept, that heading right there. So I'm going to have the autopilot fly this heading until it intercepts the radial. And we are 31.2 DME out from the station. Basically just want to fly this heading until we see movement on the CDI, which I believe it's moving already. Looks like it might be. Okay, yeah, it's moving. Alright, it's going to slowly come in as we intercept the radial. When we get close, I'm either going to select nav hold, which will automatically put us on that radial, or what I'll do is set heading to the radial I want to fly, or close to it, which is what I like to do, then hit nav hold, because it's a little bit easier on the aircraft. This is taking too long. Hold on. What I'm doing here is I'm just commanding the aircraft to fly right now, just straight to the station. ATC just told me to go direct. That's what we're going to say. Alright, we're roughly right there. Okay. This is the St. Johns River right here, by the way. And in fact, I believe Green Cove Springs is right here in front of us. Yeah, that's Green Cove right there. Alright, so one last thing to go over during cruise is mixture. Now, mixture can be a bit finicky. Alright, proper leaning of the fuel-air mixture is necessary to achieve the performance characteristics in the manual. So we want to lean the mixture out properly. Now again, as we were climbing, we were leaning it out, and using my 1 mouse wheel turn per 1,000 feet adage there will give you a pretty good fuel mixture by the time you hit takeoff. I'm going to reset it to a lower setting here. Now this knob here will control the EGT indication here. This is a reference line. Sorry. This is a reference line for your use when setting the EGT at peak. What we want to do is lean the mixture out and watch the EGT increase. You want to lean it out slowly, just so you know. So one click on your mouse wheel every few seconds. I'm going to let the EGT stabilize real quick. This is about where it was when we cruise. Alright, it's stabilized. I'm going to lean it out. One mouse wheel turn will click every couple seconds. What I'm doing is I'm watching the EGT rise. Still rising. EGT is still rising as I lean the mixture out. So much easier in an aircraft with G1000 avionics where you have lean assist. Still rising. Still rising, Jesus. I'm starting to hear some performance hits in the engine itself. Alright, there, it's decreasing now. One mouse wheel turn to richen it every couple seconds. Just one click on the mouse wheel turn until I see a decrease. See, it should be increasing just a little bit. There it is, it's increasing. Still increasing. Decreasing, alright. Now I'm going to set my knob to where the EGT indication is right now. Right there. Now I'm going to give it one full mouse wheel turn in. That's peak EGT. That knob where I set it is peak EGT. That's where you want the fuel air mixture to be. I gave it one mouse wheel turn in and we're flying just shy of peak. So this is where you want your fuel mixture to be when cruising. I can see St. Augustine now. That's awesome. We're directly over the St. Johns River. That's Jacksonville Naval Air Station over there. Alright, so that's cruise. We've showed you how to lean the mixture. There's one other way to fly, which is lean of peak, where you lean the mixture out enough that you're flying above peak EGT. Now, this means you're going to have a hotter engine, but you have better fuel consumption. So if you're running low on gas and you're trying to stretch it to make it somewhere to get gas, and you're out in the middle of the nowhere and your tanks are running low, try running at lean of peak. This will give you less fuel burn, but the engine will run hotter. So you got to watch that. See, we're running lean of peak now. EGT is above peak. Now, although it's not recommended, there's another way to run it, which is rich of peak, which is useful when you need to cool your engine off. So let's say the engine was running hot. We saw the oil temperature climb up to red line. What we could do is shove this all the way in at a sacrifice of fuel flow and engine performance, but the temperature will start to decrease because cool fuel is going to be taking it away. One other thing you could do is descend and get more airflow going through the engine. So fuel management is part of your engine temperature management. Alrighty. That was cruise. Next video, descents. You'll climb all the time with the engine at full power. I like to climb at the cruise portion of the climb at 80 knots of airspeed. This gives you a good climb rate of roughly around 1,000 feet per minute